Hello everyone, welcome back to social science class. In the previous session we had discussed the chapter Ancient Civilizations of the World, in which you studied the Egyptian civilization. I hope you remember. So today we shall discuss the Mesopotamian civilization and the Chinese civilization. So Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamian is an area that lies in a valley between two rivers. Mesopotamia was a place where many cities began to grow. As its name suggests, Mesopotamia was located between two rivers. The two rivers were the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. When a newborn baby begins life, he or she is placed in a cradle. Mesopotamia is called the cradle of civilization because the first civilizations began there about 5,500 years ago in 3,500 BC. Mesopotamia was located in the Middle East and surrounded by desert. People came to Mesopotamia because the soil between the two rivers was very fertile. As children, Mesopotamia is an area that lies in a valley between two rivers. Many of the places described in the Old Testament can be seen here. The land which inspires awe and fascination, in the sense the passion, is called the land between the rivers or Mesopotamia by the Greeks. The two rivers Euphrates and Tigris had made this West Asian barren land very fertile. Yes, the two rivers Euphrates and Tigris had made this West Asian barren land very fertile. It was the fertility of this area that attracted the people to it, since food crops could be grown with very little effort. The northern hilly tribes and the southern nomadic tribes of the desert tried to establish control over this area. The rivalry between these tribes led to a number of endless conflicts. However, in the midst of these conflicts, there emerged a civilization of strong and brave race. So children, as I told you, it was the fertility of this area that attracted so many people because food crops could be grown with little effort. Thus, the northern hilly tribes and the southern nomadic tribes of the desert tried to establish control over this area. So we see the emerge of a civilization, the strong and brave race called the Sumerians. The Sumerians were the first ones to evolve a system of writing in Mesopotamia. For 30 centuries, all those who entered the fertile valley, the Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians and Persians used this system of writing, which was called cuneiform. So, the Sumerians were the first ones to evolve the system of writing in Mesopotamia. Later on, we see the Babylonians, Assyrians and Persians used the system of writing which was called cuneiform. The central area of this civilization was the southern part of the valley between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. From olden times, this area had been referred to as Babylonia. The northern part of Babylonia was called Akkad and the southern part Sumer. The northern part of Mesopotamia was called as Assyria. The history of Mesopotamia is a story of endless hatred and conflict. The Sumerians, the hilly tribe from the north, were the first to arrive here. As I told you, the Sumerians, who came from the hilly tribe from northern side, were the first ones to enter this area, the fertile area between the two rivers called Euphrates and Tigris. They who used to worship their gods on the top of the hills, after coming to the plains, built artificial hills and established their places of worship there. As I told you, the Sumerians, they belonged to the hilly tribe of the northern side. Okay, they used to worship their gods on the top of the hills. So children, when these Sumerians, when they came to the fertile land, okay, to the plains, they built artificial hills and established their places of worship there. These were called ziggurats. Okay, the artificial hills which were established by the Sumerians to worship is called ziggurat. They did not know how to build stairs and therefore surrounded them here refers to ziggurat. Okay, with sloping galleries. Okay, they were not knowing how to build the stairs, so therefore surrounded them. In the sense, ziggurat was surrounded by the sloping galleries. In the figure you can see here. Okay, the Sumerians were the ones who constructed artificial hills in order to worship. And the Jews called these, in the sense ziggurat, as the towers of Babel. The towers of Babel was called by the Jews to the ziggurat. The Sumerians had entered Mesopotamia in 4000 BCE. Later, they were overpowered in the sense they were defeated by the Akkadians, one of the tribes of the Arabian desert. These are known as Semites. After 1,000 years, these Akkadians came to be ruled over by the Amorites, another Semitic tribe. The most famous king of the Amorites was Hammurabi. He got built a fabulous palace for himself in Babylonia. He framed the codes of justice and made Babylonia to be considered the best administered kingdom in the whole of the old world, ancient world. So the most famous king of the Amorites was Hammurabi. He got built a fabulous palace for himself in Babylonia, and he also framed the codes of justice and made Babylonia to be considered the best administered kingdom in the whole of the old world. The Hittites who came later occupied the valley and destroyed all that they could not carry away. These Hittites were defeated by the Assyrians, who were the followers of Asura, the desert god. So the Hittites were defeated by the Assyrians. Assyrians were the followers of Asura, the desert god. The Assyrians occupied the whole of West Asia and Egypt till about 7th century BCE and collected taxes from all the people there. Another Semitic tribe, the Chaldeans, re-established Babylonia in the 7th century BCE and developed it into a prominent capital of that time. So children, we see the Assyrians occupied the whole of the West Asia and Egypt till 7th century BCE and collected tax from all the people there. Another Semitic tribe, the Chaldeans, re-established Babylonia in 7th century BCE and developed it into prominent capital of that time. Nebuchadnezzar was the greatest king among them. He encouraged the study of science, but Chaldeans came under the attack of the Persians in the 6th century BCE. 200 years later, Alexander transformed this place of the Semitic peoples into a Greek province. After the rulers of the Romans and Turks who followed Alexander, this civilization declined and turned into a wilderness. So children, 200 years later, Alexander transformed this place of the Semitic peoples into a Greek province. So this fertile land, was transformed into a Greek province. After the rulers of the Romans and the Turks, after the Greeks came the Romans and the Turks who followed Alexander. This civilization declined and turned to a wilderness. Wilderness in a sense, earlier with the help of the two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris, this land was called as the fertile land. Later on, it turned to a wild, uncultivated area. So this was the end of the Mesopotamian civilization. Now let's move to the Chinese civilization. It is a special feature of all ancient civilizations that they were established on the river plains. The Chinese civilization was no exception to this. But the river which led to the establishment of the Chinese civilization was known as China's sorrow. This was the HWANG River. The Chinese civilization was known as the Chinese sorrow, just because of the HWANG River. After the floods, this river changed its course in an unpredictable manner and inundated houses and agricultural lands. After the floods, the river changed its course. Its course means its direction in an unpredictable manner and inundated houses, flooded houses and agricultural lands. It would render all the canals useless. This was the reason the people of that area referred to it as the symbol of sorrow. Thus it was called China's sorrow. HWANG River was called as China's sorrow. According to archaeological evidences, the first ruling family of the Chinese civilization was the Shang dynasty. It ruled in the period between the 18th century BC and 12th century BC under the rule of this dynasty. The people had developed a wonderful culture by the 14th century BC. The Shang dynasty was overpowered, in the sense defeated by the neighboring Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty continued the good traditions of the Shang culture and ruled till 250 BCE. So according to the archaeological evidences, the first ruling family of the Chinese civilization, the first dynasty which ruled the Chinese civilization was the Shang dynasty. Later came the Zhou dynasty. In the Zhou dynasty, there was a section of officials below the kings. The king allotted portions of land to the officials. In return for that, the officials supported the king during the battles. In the social stratification, the communities in the next level were the merchants and craftsmen. Apart from them, you can find a great majority of peasants as well. In the social stratification, in the sense the social grades, we see the merchants and the craftsmen. Apart from them, we see the majority of the peasants, in the sense the countrymen as well. In the lowest strata, that is the status of social hierarchy, were the slaves. The prisoners of war were made slaves by the kings. So children, now let's go to read about the Great Wall of China. I hope you know the Great Wall of China. The Chinese Empire consisted of many small provinces. 7 big states were created, bringing these smaller provinces under them. Every state that was created thus constructed a wall along its boundary for protection. Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi ordered that the walls of the northern Chinese states be connected. This enabled the northern walls to ward off the attacks of invaders from the north. The construction of the Great Wall began in the 7th century BC and continued till the 16th century. The worn out parts were repaired and strengthened. When the work was completed, it stretched to more than 5,000 kilometers. So, the Great Wall of China, it stretched to more than 5,000 kilometers. So, it is one of the 7 wonders of the world. The Great Wall of China is one of the 7 wonders of the world. The Shan kings spent quite an amount of time in conquests and battles. Hence, the army was in prominence. The Shang kings spent much of their time in battles. Hence, the army was in prominence. Much of the importance was given to the army. The soldier enjoyed a dignified place in society. Soldiers wore bronze helmets and metal armors. The bronze daggers, axes, bows and iron-tipped arrows which they used have been found. Okay, the soldier enjoyed a dignified place in the society. Soldiers wore bronze helmets and metal armors. They were using bronze daggers, axes, bows and iron-tipped arrows. The people of the Shang dynasty depended on agriculture. They had a well-organized system of irrigation. They used to grow plenty of rice. Okay, the people of the Shang dynasty, they depended, majority of the people depended on agriculture and they had a well-organized system of irrigation since they grew plenty of rice. The Chinese used to wear thin cotton dresses. Here in this picture you can see the costume of the Chinese. They used silk too and engaged in silkworm rearing. Silk manufacturing was a prominent industry. Okay, the Chinese used silk and engaged themselves in silkworm rearing and started to manufacture. This manufacturing was a prominent industry. Silk was manufactured in prominent industry. The Chinese used to make excellent pots and had learned to make various objects from porcelain. Okay, the Chinese used to make excellent pots and had learned to make various objects from porcelain. Okay, this porcelain was originated in China. It was a custom of the Chinese to worship their ancestors. Thus they believed that a dead man became a spirit and that the spirit had special powers. Okay, these Chinese, they started to worship their ancestors and they believed that the dead man became a spirit and that the spirit had the special powers. The dead body was buried along with various wooden articles, pots, bronze vessels and other objects. The tombs of kings used to be quite large. Okay, as they believed that the dead man had a spirit and special powers, the dead body was buried along with various wooden articles in the tomb, such as pots, bronze vessels and other objects. The tombs of kings used to be quite large. The Chinese tradition of writing began with pictures and got transformed into an ideographic script. We see, children, the people of China developed their own system of writing. At first, they drew small pictures on bamboo slips to express their idea. These pictures were known as pictogram. With the progress of time, further improvement was made on pictures. Writers used to write on silk and bamboo slips. So, porcelain and the Great Wall are the exceptional contributions of this culture. So, what are the important contributions of the Chinese civilization? We see porcelain and the Great Wall. These are the exceptional contributions of this culture, the Chinese culture. So children, today you studied the Mesopotamian civilization and Chinese civilization. By this we complete the chapter. Watch this video again and again to understand the concept clearly. Thank you, children.